So, everyone I know is looking for the answers on how to be more productive or to have more money, the answers on how to be happier, healthier, to have a more meaningful life, to make all of your dreams come true. And I'm not that interested in those answers anymore. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I'm more interested in how to ask the right questions. Because I've found that if you ask the right questions, not only can the answers change your life, but even the search for the answers can be equally rewarding. But there's a problem, and I'm aware that my microphone's cracked. There we go. Okay. There's a problem because asking the right questions is not easy. Because if I ask the question and then I try to answer it with the same mindset, I'm not going to get to the change that I want. So it requires a real shift in my focus, a new mindset. And so what I'd like to do is share with you how I was able to shift my focus and then the questions that I started asking myself as a result. So I'll give you a little bit of background. That's a picture of me and my sister Vicky. I was 9, so I'm the bigger one. Vicky was 7. And this picture was taken in Toronto. We were living with our aunt at the time because our mother was a drug addict. And she's had problems with addiction most of our lives. By the time this picture was taken, Vicky and I had been through a lot. And when I was 14 and Vicky was 12, we found ourselves pretty much on our own, having to fend for ourselves at times even, going from place to place. And this made us 2 very tough little girls. But it also made us very angry, and at times we were very self-destructive with that anger. And when I was age 17, I was a broken spirit. I felt completely devastated by my life, and the thought of my future was terrifying. And by a miracle or luck or whatever you want to call it, I met a woman who was a therapist, and she was purely motivated by compassion. She was willing to work with me for free. And she didn't do any of those things that therapists do. She must have been doing an experiment or something. She didn't put me on medication, but what she did was she taught me how to breathe. A slow and gentle breath it completely stopped all the noise in my head. And I stumbled across this moment of heightened awareness. And in that moment, I was able to ask myself one question. Am I capable of more than this? And ever since asking that question, I have been trying my best to find the answer to it. And I took all the lemons that life had given me, and it had given me a bushel and a peck, and I started building a lot of lemonade stands. And my sister, however, she took her life's lemons and she went looking for a bottle of tequila. But I found that through a lot of hard work, and I was probably the hardest working person around, and I made a lot of mistakes, and eventually I found people who were willing to step up and mentor me and take me under their wing. And my life started to work. I found what I loved to do, and I found my tribe. But I still felt that there was something missing in my life, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And this if you know anything about me, I'm a data geek. So there's this 2010 Princeton study that says when you earn $75,000 a year, you are above the struggle in life. And this gives you some peace of mind and some happiness. But the interesting thing about this study was that your sense of well-being didn't increase with the more money that you earned beyond that number. In fact, it was very temporary. And we see this with people who win the lottery. You know, they may be ecstatic initially because they can fly to Paris on a whim or buy a Tesla, but eventually they'll revert back to being who they were. And even with a greater set of problems at times, and oftentimes a whole new set of distant relatives they never saw before. And so this lets us know that winning in life doesn't make someone happy. And I even found that doing what I love to do wasn't enough for me, because I had this feeling that my accomplishments truly weren't really making that much of a difference. And I had been given a second chance in life. And what was I going to do with it to say thank you? And so my next question was, what is my contribution? Now, we all know people who really make a difference in the world. People like my friend Peggy Albrecht, Friendly House. She runs Friendly House in Los Angeles for the past 30 years. Because of Peggy's dedication to service, they helped my mother 2 years ago. And because of that, I now have a real relationship with my mother for the first time in my life. And even my husband Vic, who's here tonight, he woke up one morning with this sense that he had a limited amount of time left on the planet, as many people do in midlife. But for many of us, that thought kind of just comes and goes with that first cup of coffee. And he wanted to really find out what he could do that was more meaningful. And so he went to go find that answer in Tibet. And while he was there on this amazing journey, he met these monks at a monastery. And they were living under these terrible conditions, but yet they were so happy and joyful and kind that he was moved to want to help them. And he made a promise to rebuild that monastery. And he did it. And there it is, with all of them there. And there's Vic with the monks. And obviously I'm a little proud of him. And now he went on after that to build an orphanage in Vietnam. And now he's working on a girls' school for nomadic children so that they can help preserve their culture in Tibet. And there are ordinary people like Vic and Peggy all around us doing amazing, extraordinary things. In fact, 20% of you Americans are donating 4.5 hours a week of your time to volunteer work. That's a lot. And the rest of us, 88% of U.S. households in 2011 donated money to charity. And it's not just the wealthiest or the middle class. The lowest income households actually donate a larger percentage of their annual income. So that means that all of us somewhere really want to help people in a meaningful way, but we often think about it at some future point in our life rather than now. And I was trying to find the time and volunteering and writing checks. And when I really looked at the quality of my day, though, it was spent mostly in frustration. I was trying to keep all these plates up in the air, find the time to spend with the people I love. And the rest of the time I was dealing with the bad behavior of a bunch of people who refused to do things the way I wanted them to. And it's kind of exhausting, right? So I took a trip. I went on sabbatical, and I went to Tibet. And I went to go see the monastery that Vic had built. And I'm not a hippie, and I don't do third world toilets. Well, I can do them now after the trip, but while I was there, I met Lama Karwang, Vic's teacher. And he's a Tibetan Lama of the highest order who, in spite of being imprisoned for 19 years, was the happiest, kindest person I've ever met. And you could feel it. I could feel it right when I was in his presence. And he passed away last year, and I love to share what he taught me because I feel like it's a way that he can continue to teach even after he's gone. And he took one look at me, and he said, we had a translator with us, and he said, I'm going to give you a 5-minute meditation. And now my husband meditates a lot, and I got 5 minutes. But he didn't call it meditation. He called it training the mind. And he taught me to do it with my eyes open because he said it wasn't about retreating from my life, but it was about engaging more deeply with the moment with mindfulness. And here I had the tools to recreate that moment of heightened awareness that I had stumbled across when I was 17. But then he gave me the key. He gave me the missing element, the thing that I was looking for. He told me that mindfulness on its own is not enough. I need to combine it and cultivate compassion. And it's that same compassion that that woman reached out to me with all those years ago. Can I be honest and say that I don't believe that I would be standing here right now in this moment without her kindness? The Dalai Lama says that if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And I am an example of many people doing just that. But he also says if you want yourself to be happy, practice compassion. But how do we practice compassion? Well, I think if we all just stop for a second and look at our interactions throughout the day-to-day, I'm sure we could see many opportunities where we could be kinder. Just a little more giving. And I'm not talking about passing out hugs all day at work or school, although that could be nice, I guess. But if I get on a plane tomorrow and the pilot comes out and gives me a hug before we take off, I'm going to be a little worried about the next 4 hours of my life. But practicing compassion is really just as simple as raising your intention just one notch above self-interest. So how can we talk a little bit more differently with that customer service representative? Could we be the one nice person they interact with today? Can we look at how we're giving that note to that employee or that student or that child to make sure that our communication is not doing any real damage to that person? Understanding that we have real impact on everyone around us, and not only with them, but with everyone else they come in contact with, whether it's negatively or positively. And so I have a little trick, and I'll share it with you. I stop and I look around the room, and I just check, do people feel better when I'm around? What am I contributing to this moment or this meeting or this interaction, this initiative? And I'm embarrassed to say that the answer for me, even as recently as yesterday, it's not always positive. But with this practice, I can stop for a second and just be mindful and look at how can I change my intention to give rather than take, to look at what am I contributing rather than at what I'm not getting. And this is really the key to having a successful life. Because if people feel better when you're around, they will hire you. They'll want you around even more and they'll promote you. They will invite you to all of their parties and they'll marry you. But more importantly, you'll be the first person that they call when they need help or they need to talk to a friend. And those are the moments that I have decided I'll be the most proud of at the end of my life, with a new definition of success that's based on how did others feel about my contribution to their lives. And when I read the eulogy at my grandmother's funeral, I spoke about the difference she had made in my life. And then as I sat down, I had this feeling that it was sick. I was sick to my stomach because I realized that my grandmother would have given anything to hear me say those words to her before she died, and I never did. And so now I've made it a practice that I let people know, even if it's small, that I appreciate their contribution. But especially if they're nearing the end of their journey, to write them formally a letter, the difference they made in my life, that their life had meaning so they can leave with that information. And so I want to show you the last picture of me and my sister together. It was taken at Coachella, so that's why there's the hipster in the beanie photobombing us. Photobombing our last happy moment. But Vicki died, as you can imagine, of a drug overdose on December 7th, 2012. It was not that long ago. And it was the saddest day of my life. And I share this not as some cheap emotional trick, but because it's the most powerful example I have of why asking these questions of yourself is so important. because we came from the same background, we came from the same life experiences and even the same DNA, and yet our lives turned out so differently. And I can't help but wonder, had she taken that time to just stop the noise in her head long enough to ask these questions, would she still be here today? And so I hope that maybe sharing her story and my journey, but more importantly for her, that it'll bring some dignity and meaning to her life. But I would really love to see if it could inspire some of you to take that moment to find that stillness, to just sit quietly and expand the gaps between one thought and the next. Just long enough to see a new vision of your life that's bigger, more connected, and more meaningful. And to start by giving compassion to yourself first, and then to ask yourself perhaps that one little question: what is your contribution? Thank you.